Chalo friends, let's dive into one of the most important topics for your exams, carbohydrate metabolism. We're going to break down exactly how our body uses that energy from food step by step. It's all about a beautifully regulated economy that's happening right inside our cells. So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with glucose, the body's currency. Then we'll look at glycolysis, which is like spending that currency. Then gluconeogenesis, how we make new currency. We'll cover the hormonal regulation, the central bank of it all, and finally, metabolic crises. We're going to cover these 5 key areas to make sure you absolutely master this topic. Okay, so let's start with the absolute basics. What is this whole process really about? We're going to build a really strong foundation first, Tika? Think of glucose as the body's pesa, its main energy currency. Everything the body does, it requires this currency. So this entire metabolism is basically just about managing this pesa, how we earn it, spend it, save it, and even how we make more when we're running low. Right, so these are the main biochemical pathways we study. Each one has a very specific job in managing our energy currency. For today, we're going to focus on the big 2, spending currency and making new currency, yani ki glycolysis and gluconeogenesis. Okay, let's get into our first major topic. So what happens when a cell needs energy right now? To run, to think, to function? Well, it spends glucose, and it does that through a process called glycolysis. So the crucial point here is that this is the fundamental energy-releasing pathway. It happens in the cytoplasm of pretty much every single cell in your body. It's the first and most basic step to get energy from the food that you eat. So you see, it's like that saying, you have to spend money to make money. The cell actually invests 2 ATPs to get things started. But in return, in the payoff phase, it gets back 4 ATPs. So the net gain is 2 ATP. Samjhe? This is a very, very common exam question, so please make a note of this. Now, what's really interesting here are these 3 irreversible steps, each with a key enzyme. But I want you to pay close attention to PFK1. That's phosphofructokinase 1. Ye bahut important hai. Why? Because it is the rate-limiting step. Think of it like the main tap that controls the flow for the entire pathway. This makes it a huge favorite for MCQs, so definitely remember this one. And this is a perfect example of why this biochemistry stuff really matters for us as pharmacy students. You see, our red blood cells, they depend entirely on glycolysis for their energy. So if that final enzyme, pyruvate kinase, is deficient, these cells just can't make enough ATP. They become fragile and they literally break apart, and that leads to hemolytic anemia. Okay, so what happens if you're fasting? Maybe for an exam, or you're just skipping a meal, and you have no glucose coming in from your food. The body can't just stop working, right? And our brain especially is a total glucose addict. It needs a constant supply. So this is where the body has to get smart and make its own glucose. So these 2 pathways, glycolysis and gluconeogenesis, they're basically opposites. One breaks glucose down, the other builds it up. And they are reciprocally regulated. What does that mean? It just means when one is on, the other is switched off. Which makes perfect sense, right? You don't want to be making and breaking down glucose at the very same time. That would be so inefficient. The body is incredibly smart. It can use non-carbohydrate sources to create fresh glucose. For example, during intense exercise, your muscles produce a lot of lactate. The liver can actually take that lactate and convert it back to glucose. And during fasting, it can use bits of fats and proteins too. This is absolutely crucial for our survival during fasting or really long exercise. So this enzyme, glucose 6-phosphatase, it's the final, crucial step of gluconeogenesis. Think of it as the exit door for glucose from the liver. Now, if this enzyme is missing, the liver can make all the glucose it wants, but it can't open the door to release it into the blood. And what happens then? Severe hypoglycemia, especially between meals. This is a classic example of something called a glycogen storage disease. चलो, एक छोटा सा ब्रेक. अगर ये वीडियो हेल्पफुल लग रहा है तो प्लीज़ फार्मर एड चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करें, लाइक करें और शेयर करें अपने फार्मेसी फ्रेंड्स के साथ. It really helps us out. ठीक है? Okay, let's get back to it. Okay, now for maybe the most important part for our clinical practice. How is all of this controlled? Think of hormones like insulin and glucagon as the RBI governors of our body's economy. They are the ones giving the master commands that control the flow of energy for the entire system. This table is everything. It's so important. Just think,
After a meal, your blood sugar is high, right? So the pancreas releases insulin. Insulin is the I have plenty signal. It tells your cells, hey, spend this glucose, store it, so it stimulates glycolysis. Now, when you're fasting, your blood sugar drops, and that's when glucagon is released. Glucagon is the help, I'm running low alarm. It tells the liver, make more glucose now, so it stimulates gluconeogenesis. Simple, right?
And here's the really brilliant part. Besides those big master hormones controlling the whole body, each cell has its own local feedback system too. For example, if a cell has a lot of ATP, that's a direct signal that its energy levels are full. So what does it do? It automatically slows down glycolysis. It's this beautiful system of macro-level hormonal control and micro-level cellular control, all working in perfect harmony. Okay, so now let's look at what happens when this perfectly balanced system goes wrong. And this is where your role as a pharmacist becomes absolutely critical, understanding the disease and, of course, the drugs we use to treat it. Let's take diabetes mellitus. In diabetes, you have tons of glucose in the blood. That's hyperglycemia. But because of problems with insulin, the cells can't actually use that glucose. It's like monetary hyperinflation. You have lots and lots of cash, but it has no value. It can't be spent. And all that excess glucose just hangs around, causing massive damage all over the body. So these are some of the key conditions you will definitely see in your practice. Things like diabetes, glycogen storage diseases, lactose intolerance. Each one is basically a failure in a very specific part of this complex metabolic machinery we've been talking about.
All right, so for a quick exam recap, these are the absolute must-know points from today. Ready? Glycolysis breaks down glucose. Key enzyme is PFK1. Gluconeogenesis makes new glucose. Insulin is for the fed state, it lowers blood sugar. Glucagon is for the fasting state, it raises blood sugar. And remember the key diseases like diabetes and the GSDs. This is your high-yield summary right here.
Remember, this isn't just dry biochemistry. It's the language of how our body works. So keep studying and keep asking questions, because understanding this foundation, this will make you a fantastic pharmacist. All the best.